The billionaire's escape. He rescued a lost soul. She rescued his life. High stakes, Alexander Thorne thought his multi-billion-dollar empire was everything. Sarah Evans knew survival was all that mattered. They were separated by a 3,000-mile distance and a staggering difference in wealth. But when a raging mountain storm forces a shocking accident, their parallel worlds collide, revealing a hidden secret and a second chance neither saw coming. Before we dive in, smash the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Chapter 1. Two Worlds, One Destination. Sarah Evans got up as the sun barely peeked over the Rocky Mountains. Since becoming a single mother to triplets, her days began before dawn. She brewed cheap coffee in the old machine inherited from her mother, and while waiting, reviewed the bills scattered across the worn wooden table. Money was always tight, but she always found a way to stretch every dollar. "Mom, Matt is bugging me," shouted Sophie from the room the three children shared. Sarah sighed, tying back her rebellious hair before heading to the room. In 30 minutes, she needed to make breakfast, dress the children, Matt, Sophie, and Luke, and rush them to the rural school before running to her first job as an assistant at the village store. In the afternoon, she would tutor the neighboring farmers' children, and at night, when the triplets were asleep, she would knit scarves to sell at the Sunday market. Over 2,000 miles away, Alexander Thorne observed Manhattan from the window of his penthouse. His clock read 6 in the morning, and he had already been working for 2 hours. His assistant had left imported coffee and breakfast prepared by his personal chef. The silver tray remained untouched next to his latest generation laptop. His phone vibrated for the 10th time. Another message from Vivian, his ex-fiancée, threatening to air his secrets to the press if he didn't reconsider the engagement cancellation. Alexander ignored it, just as he ignored invitations to charity galas and calls from his father. The financial empire he had built kept him busy, but it was increasingly difficult to remember why he kept accumulating millions. "Mr. Thorne, the board is waiting for your video conference," his assistant announced through the intercom. "Tell them they'll have to wait. Cancel my commitments for the week." Alexander made an impulsive decision. He needed to escape, to get away from the constant noise and the emptiness of his existence. While Sarah served oatmeal to her children on mismatched plates and reminded them to brush their teeth, Alexander ordered his pilot to prepare the private jet. She counted coins for the gas in her dilapidated pickup truck. He signed checks without looking at the amounts. Two parallel worlds that should never cross. Sarah, with her unwavering dignity and scarcity, and Alexander, with his fortune, incapable of filling his existential void. He sought silence. She yearned for stability. Neither imagined that in less than 24 hours, their paths would intertwine irreversibly in a remote mountain town where Sarah struggled to raise her children and to which Alexander would flee, seeking a peace that money couldn't buy. A storm was brewing over the mountains, the same one that would cause the accident that would change their lives forever. Chapter 2. The Prince and the Pickup Truck. The afternoon sun was relentless on the dirt road as Sarah drove home in her old pickup. The day had been exhausting. 6 hours at the store, 2 hours tutoring, and barely enough time to buy groceries with the little money she had left. "Damn it!" she exclaimed when the truck shook as it passed over a deep pothole. Sarah slowed down as she approached the curve of the mountain road when she spotted something unusual. An immobile figure by the edge of the forest. As she got closer, she distinguished an unconscious man in clothes that clearly didn't belong to any local resident. His suit, though dirty and torn, was obviously expensive. "Sir, can you hear me?" Sarah knelt beside him, checking his vital signs. The man was breathing, but a head wound was bleeding profusely. Sarah looked around. They were almost 5 miles from the village, with no phone signal and the night approaching. She couldn't leave him there. With effort, she managed to hoist him into the back of the pickup. He must have had an accident, she thought, covering the stranger with the blanket she always carried for emergencies. What Sarah didn't know was that she was rescuing Alexander Thorne, who, in a fit of frustration, had dismissed his chauffeur and decided to walk through the woods, only to slip on a rocky slope. When she arrived at her modest wooden house with a corrugated roof, the triplets ran to greet her. "Mom, you brought a wounded prince!" exclaimed Sophie, the most imaginative of the three, upon seeing the stranger. "He's not a prince, my love. He's someone who needs help," Sarah replied, as her mother, Grandma Rose, looked at her with concern. "Daughter, why would you bring a stranger here? What if he's dangerous?" "He's hurt, Mom. I couldn't leave him to die on the road." Between the two women, and with the curious help of the children, they managed to move Alexander to the only sofa in the living room. Sarah cleaned the wound with the first aid kit she carefully kept, observing the stranger's face. Defined features, a few days' beard, and an expression of worry, even in his unconsciousness. Hours later, when Grandma Rose had left and the children were asleep, Alexander began to regain consciousness. His eyes opened disoriented, scanning the wooden ceiling, the walls decorated with children's drawings, and finally resting on Sarah, who was mending clothes by the light of a simple lamp. "Where am I?" he asked hoarsely. Sarah put down her sewing and approached with a glass of water. "In my house. I found you unconscious on the road. Do you remember what happened?" Alexander tried to sit up, but dizziness forced him to lie down again. "I was walking. I slipped. I don't remember more," he replied, noticing the humility of the dwelling. "I need to make a call. The nearest phone is in the village 5 miles away, and there's no cell signal on this part of the mountain," she explained naturally. "You'll have to wait until tomorrow." Alexander's expression transformed into a mixture of disbelief and frustration that did not go unnoticed by Sarah. "Are you bothered by having to stay in such a simple place, sir?" "Thorne. Alexander Thorne," he replied, aware of the sharpness in his own voice. "And no, I'm not bothered. I just have important matters to attend to." Sarah smiled with a certain irony as she got up to fetch more water. "We all have important matters, Mr. Thorne. The difference is some of us can wait without feeling lost." Alexander watched this woman, who had interrupted her routine to help a stranger, and for the first time in a long time, he felt genuinely disconcerted. Not because he was far from his world of luxury, but because Sarah's quiet dignity contrasted brutally with the internal chaos that had led him there. Chapter 3. The Empty Suit. The sunrise arrived with the crowing of roosters and the sound of small feet running down the hallway. Alexander woke up startled, forgetting for a moment where he was. Reality hit him when he saw the rustic ceiling and felt the worn sofa beneath his body. He had spent the night in someone else's house, far from his Egyptian cotton sheets and orthopedic mattress. "The mister is awake!" shouted one of the children, peeking into the living room. "Matt, don't bother the guest." Elena's voice came from the kitchen, mingled with the aroma of fresh coffee and hot tortillas. Alexander sat up with difficulty. His head hurt less, but the feeling of being out of place intensified with every second. He observed the modest living room, worn but clean furniture, simple family photographs, wild flowers in a converted jam jar vase. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne." Sarah appeared with a steaming cup. "How do you feel?" "Better, thank you," he replied, taking the cup, surprised by the intense flavor of the coffee. "This is really good. It's regional coffee. We roast it ourselves," she explained, as 3 pairs of curious eyes studied him from the doorway. "Children, say good morning to Mr. Thorne." The 6-year-old triplets came forward with a mixture of shyness and curiosity. Sophie, Matt, and Luke introduced themselves politely, though they didn't stop looking at him as if he were a creature from another planet. "Your clothes are drying," Sarah continued. I lent you some clothes from my late husband. I hope you don't mind." Alexander looked at the simple clothes he was now wearing and nodded, uncomfortable with the situation, but grateful. He didn't have a late husband, but he didn't want to correct her. "I need to contact my office. When can we go to the village? I'm taking the children to school in an hour. You can come with Amadas, but I warn you the doctor will want to check that wound." The family's morning routine unfolded before Alexander's astonished eyes. Sarah preparing breakfasts and lunch boxes, checking homework, combing Sophie's hair while giving instructions to the boys about behaving well at school. All with an efficiency born of necessity and a warmth he had never experienced. In the rickety pickup, Alexander observed the landscape while Sarah sang children's songs with the kids. For a moment, he wondered what it would be like to grow up like this, far from the cold boarding school his father had sent him to at the age of 8. "Why do you live so isolated?" he asked, when they dropped the children off at the small rural school. "We're not isolated. We have everything we need," she replied as she drove toward the village. "Besides, here I can raise them with values that are being lost in the city." The village turned out to be smaller than Alexander expected. A main street, a few basic shops, a medical office, and a public telephone that looked like a museum relic. While the local doctor checked his wound, Sarah waited patiently, flipping through a worn book. "You just need rest," the doctor concluded. "No exertion for a few days." "Impossible. I must return to New York today," Alexander protested. "There's no transport until the day after tomorrow," Sarah intervened. "The main road is blocked by a landslide, and the only bus connecting to the city leaves in 2 days." Alexander felt complete control of his life vanish. When he finally managed to contact his assistant in New York, the news got worse. A storm was battering the East Coast. All flights were canceled. During the drive back to Sarah's house, an uncomfortable silence filled the pickup. Alexander stared out the window, lost in gloomy thoughts. Sarah observed him out of the corner of her eye. "Sometimes," she said finally, "what seems like an obstacle is just an opportunity in disguise." "I don't believe in those self-help phrases," he replied dryly. "It's not self-help, it's experience." Sarah smiled as she pulled over next to a small garden. "Help me pick some vegetables for lunch." Alexander wanted to refuse, but something in Sarah's firm gaze stopped him. Without realizing it, he spent the next hour learning to distinguish ripe tomatoes and collecting herbs whose names he didn't know. To his surprise, the tension in his shoulders began to loosen under the warm mountain sun. Interactive question. If you were Alexander, would you be more frustrated by the lack of control, no signal, blocked roads, or intrigued by the unexpected simplicity of Sarah's life? Comment your biggest feeling. If you admire Sarah's resilience, hit the like button. Chapter 4. The Unthinkable. Coincidence. The days passed with a routine that Alexander began to find strangely comforting. In the mornings, he helped Sarah with the garden chores while the children were at school. In the afternoons, to his own surprise, he offered to check the children's math homework, discovering a patience he didn't know he possessed. One afternoon, while Sarah was preparing dinner, Alexander watched the triplets play in the yard. For the first time, he noticed something that gave him a chill. Matt had the same way of frowning when he concentrated. Luke shared his exact dimple on the left cheek. And Sophie had his exact eyes. "They're identical, but they have completely different personalities," Sarah commented, surprising him with a cup of tea. "Matt is the analytical one, Luke the dreamer, and Sophie, she is pure determination." "Like their mother," Alexander replied, trying to push away the unsettling thoughts. "Is their father not in the picture?" An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Sarah slowly stirred her tea before speaking. "There is no father, in the traditional sense," she finally explained. "I decided to become a mother through artificial insemination. After my fiancé left me to go to the city, I knew I wanted children, but I didn't need a man who could abandon them. Alexander felt the air escape his lungs. 10 years ago, newly graduated and in need of money for his first business, he had donated sperm at a clinic in New York. He never thought about the consequences. It was just another transaction. Where did you have the procedure? He asked, trying to make his voice sound casual. In the city, before moving here. A foundation offered the procedure free to low-income women. Sarah looked at him curiously. Why are you so interested? Just curiosity, he lied, as his mind calculated possibilities. It must have been difficult raising 3 children alone. The hardest part wasn't raising them, but facing the prejudices, she replied, directing her gaze toward the little ones. But I don't regret it. They are my whole life. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. The coincidences were too many. He vaguely remembered signing forms relinquishing any right or knowledge of possible children. He never imagined finding himself in this situation, sharing a roof with 3 children who might carry his DNA. The most disturbing thing wasn't that possibility, but what he was feeling for Sarah. The initial admiration had transformed into something deeper. The way she faced difficulties, her practical intelligence, her ability to find joy in the everyday. Everything about her fascinated him. During breakfast the next day, Alexander watched the children with new eyes. Luke offered him his drawing of a superhero with a cape. It's for you, so you get better faster, the little one explained, with a smile that was an exact reflection of his own. Thank you, Alexander murmured, feeling a lump in his throat. Are you feeling sick? Sarah asked, noticing his confused expression. I'm fine, just thinking about all the work piled up in New York. Do you miss your life? Sarah's question was charged with more than curiosity. Alexander reflected for a few seconds before answering. I miss the efficiency, but I don't miss the emptiness. Later, while Sarah was tutoring in the yard, Alexander took the opportunity to check her personal documents in the small room she used as an office. Among bills and receipts, he found what he was looking for: an envelope from the New Beginnings Foundation, the same non-profit organization he had helped finance years ago as part of his corporate social responsibility program. The destiny was weaving a web of coincidences too precise to be ignored. That afternoon, while helping Sarah repair the roof before the rainy season, he gathered the courage to ask her a question. If the donor wanted to meet his children, what would you think? Sarah stopped working and looked at him intently. The donation was anonymous for a reason. He waived that right. She replied firmly, but then softened her expression. Although sometimes I wonder if the children will want to meet him one day. Alexander nodded, remaining silent while a plan began to form in his mind. Chapter 5. The Helicopter and the Confrontation. The day began with a call Alexander received on the village public phone. His assistant informed him that the roads were clear and a helicopter could pick him up in the local soccer field. The news should have pleased him, but instead, he felt a heaviness in his chest. During the drive back to Sarah's house, Alexander considered his options. He could leave without revealing his suspicions, resume his life in New York, and forget the strange connection he had found. Or he could risk losing everything by telling the truth. Meanwhile, Sarah was cleaning the small room where Alexander had slept the past few days. Moving his backpack, an envelope fell to the floor. She didn't mean to pry, but the New Beginnings Foundation letterhead immediately caught her eye. With trembling hands, she opened the document. It was a sperm donation confirmation from 10 years ago. The donor's name, Alexander Thorne. It can't be, she murmured, slumping onto the bed. The pieces now fit. His interest in the children's origin, the questions about the insemination, the physical similarities she had noticed but preferred to ignore. The man she had rescued, the one she was beginning to open her heart to, was the biological father of her children. When Alexander returned, He found Sarah on the porch with an expression he had never seen in her, a mixture of pain and contained fury. "How long have you known?" she asked directly, showing him the document. Alexander paled. He hadn't expected the truth to come out this way. "I started suspecting a few days ago," he admitted, sitting across from her. "The physical similarities are—" "And you decided to stay here for what? To study us as if we were an experiment?" Sarah's voice trembled. "No, Sarah, it's not like that. I didn't know anything when I arrived here. And now what? Are you planning to claim rights over them? Is that it?" Her eyes shone with contained tears. "I don't want to take your children away from you," he replied firmly. "I legally waived any rights when I made the donation, but I can't deny that meeting them has changed something in me." Sarah stood up, crossing her arms as if trying to protect herself. "You're preparing to leave, aren't you? Your helicopter rescue arrived. Go, return to your world. We'll be fine, as we always have been." Alexander approached, trying to take her hands, but she backed away. "Sarah, I wasn't looking to be a father when I donated sperm. I was young, I needed money." He paused, knowing he sounded awful. "But these days here have shown me what I've been missing my whole life." "What exactly do you want, Alexander?" she asked directly. "I want to be a part of their lives," he replied sincerely. "Not as an intruder or as someone claiming rights, just present. And I also want to be with you." The confession hung between them as something fragile and dangerous at the same time. "With me?" Sarah let out an incredulous laugh. "The New York millionaire and the rural teacher? What an absurd cliché. It's not about money or social standing," Alexander insisted. "It's about how I feel when I'm with you, how you've taught me to see the world differently in these few days. And what will happen when you get tired of playing happy family, when you miss your private jets and your board meetings?" Sarah's eyes reflected fear, disguised as anger. "I can't risk my children's emotional stability for a whim of yours." Alexander fell silent, understanding the weight of her words. He couldn't deny she had a right to doubt. "The helicopter will arrive in 2 hours," he finally said. "I will respect your decision, whatever it is. But I want you to know that what I found here is more valuable than everything I have in New York." Sarah looked away toward the mountainous horizon. "Go, Alexander. I need time to think. The children will be home from school soon, and I don't want you to confuse them any further." Chapter 6. The Quiet Promise. When the sound of the helicopter broke the tranquility of the valley that afternoon, the triplets ran excitedly to say goodbye to Mom's friend. Alexander hugged each one, engraving their faces, their smells, their childish voices in his memory, unsure if he would ever see them again. Sarah accompanied him to the field, maintaining a physical distance that reflected her emotional state. "I'll contact you when I'm ready to talk," was her only promise before he boarded the helicopter. New York welcomed Alexander with its familiar noise and chaos. Returning to his penthouse felt strange, as if he were entering a museum of his previous life. Everything was impeccable, perfectly organized, and utterly devoid of human warmth. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Sarah faced her own internal battles. The children constantly asked for Alexander, especially Luke, who had developed a particular attachment to him. "When is Leo coming back?" he asked during dinner. "I don't know, honey. He has a very busy life in the city," Sarah replied with a heavy heart. That night, after putting the children to bed, Sarah took out the envelope with the foundation documents. The coincidence was overwhelming. The anonymous donor who had made her dream of motherhood possible turned out to be the man who now threatened her emotional stability. Alexander submerged himself in work, as he always did when he wanted to avoid facing his feelings. But this time was different. The endless meetings seemed trivial compared to the conversations he'd had with Sarah by the fire. He quickly made a decision. He began researching educational programs for rural areas, telemedicine options, and renewable energy systems adapted for remote communities. If Sarah didn't want him to be a part of their lives, at least he could improve the conditions of the place where his biological children were growing up. On the mountain, Sarah continued her daily routine, but something had changed. The house felt emptier. "You look sad, Mom," Sophie observed one afternoon. "Is it because you miss Alexander?" Sarah took the phone several times to call the number Alexander had left, but always hung up before completing the call. What could she say? That she missed him? That she was afraid of believing in promises that might be broken? Then, Alexander received an unexpected call. "Mr. Thorne, this is Dr. Ramirez from the Valley Medical Center. Sarah Evans asked me to contact you. Little Luke has severe pneumonia, and we need to transfer him to a specialized hospital in the city." Without hesitation, Alexander mobilized his resources. In less than an hour, a medical helicopter was en route to the village. He took his private jet, bringing with him the best pediatric pulmonologist he could find. The distance between two hearts began to shorten, pushed by circumstances and by feelings neither of them could continue to deny. Chapter 7. The Final Test. The pediatric hospital in the city was a different universe from the small medical center in the village. State-of-the-art equipment greeted Luke, who was breathing with difficulty through an oxygen mask. Sarah, pale with fear and exhaustion, walked beside him. Alexander was waiting in the hallway. When his eyes met Sarah's, words were unnecessary. She ran to him and collapsed in his arms, allowing herself to be vulnerable for the first time in years. "Thank you for coming," she whispered against his chest. "I didn't know who to turn to." "I will always be there for you," he replied, holding her tightly. "Dr. Kaufman is a specialist in cases like Luke's. He's already reviewing his studies." The first night was the most difficult. Luke developed a high fever. Alexander took turns accompanying Sarah and caring for the other children. "Is Luke going to die?" Matt asked with tear-filled eyes. Alexander felt the world stop. "Luke is very strong, just like your mom," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "And he has the best doctors helping him. We are all fighting for him to get better soon." Sophie, observant as always, added, "You love him very much too, don't you?" "I love all three of you more than you can imagine," Alexander confessed, surprising himself with the sincerity of his words. That afternoon, Dr. Kaufman brought good news. The fever had subsided. Luke was breathing better, and the worst had passed. Sarah finally agreed to rest. Alexander accompanied her to the door. "You should get some sleep," he suggested. "I'll stay with Luke." "You don't have to do all this," she murmured, her voice breaking with exhaustion. "You must have 1,000 pending matters in New York." "Nothing is more important than being here now," Alexander replied, gently taking her hand. "Sarah, these days have made me understand what truly matters in life, and it's not board meetings or bank accounts." Sarah looked at him intently, noticing how this man who had come into her life by chance was transforming before her eyes. "I'm afraid, Alexander," she confessed. "Not that Luke won't recover, but of what I'm feeling for you, how easy it would be to rely on your help, your presence." "I don't want you to depend on me," he replied with sincerity. "I want to be by your side, build something together. And yes, I can offer material security, but you have given me something much more valuable. You've taught me to feel again." The barriers Sarah had built for years began to crumble. Alexander was not just the anonymous donor, nor was he simply the arrogant millionaire. He was a complex man who, for some reason of destiny, had found his way to them. When Alexander leaned in to kiss her, Sarah did not pull back. The kiss was soft, almost timid, like a silent pact between two people who had found something unexpected and precious. "Go rest," he whispered against her lips. "I'll be here when you wake up." And for the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to believe in a promise. Chapter 8. Welcome home. Luke's recovery progressed favorably. After a week at the hospital, the doctors authorized his return home. During those days of crisis, the invisible barrier Sarah had maintained had vanished as she watched him genuinely engage with the children. "Don't you need to go back to New York?" Sarah asked that afternoon during the drive back to the village, in the new pickup Alexander had bought to replace her old vehicle. "My team can handle things for now," he replied, with a tranquility that surprised both of them. "I've been thinking, Sarah. Maybe I could stay a little longer. There's a cabin for sale near the village." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Alexander Thorne, the New York magnate, considering a life in the countryside. And your companies. Your life there. "I've run empires from my phone for years," he smiled. "But I've never built something that truly matters, like a family." The word hung between them, loaded with meaning and possibilities. The following days unfolded in a strange but pleasant domesticity. Alexander moved temporarily into the cabin he had bought, just 10 minutes from Sarah's house. He came every morning to have breakfast with them, respecting the space Sarah still needed. One evening, Sarah invited Alexander to dinner. "Surprise!" the triplets shouted in unison, showing drawings where they had depicted Alexander alongside them and Sarah, all holding hands. "We had a family vote," Sophie explained seriously. "We want you to stay with us forever." Alexander looked at Sarah, searching her eyes for a sign. "The children got ahead of me," she said with a nervous smile. "I wanted to talk to you after dinner." When the little ones finally went to sleep, Sarah invited Alexander onto the porch. The night was clear with a starry sky that could never be seen from Manhattan. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, "about the future, about us. Discovering you're the donor, facing my feelings for you, seeing how you've become a part of our lives. Sometimes it feels like a dream." "A good dream?" he asked with a tentative smile. "The best," Sarah replied, moving closer. "Alexander, for years I built walls to protect us. But you stayed when we needed you most. I want to build something real with you." Alexander gently caressed her cheek. "I will stay as long as you want me by your side. Not as a benefactor, not as a biological father, but as a man who loves you and those children more than anything in the world." The last barriers in Sarah's heart vanished. She leaned toward him, seeking his lips in a kiss that sealed an unspoken promise to build something true together. "Welcome home, Alexander," she whispered against his lips. And under the blanket of stars, two souls that had begun their journey from opposite ends of the spectrum finally found their common place. A home built not with walls and roofs, but with love, respect, and the certainty that some coincidences are, in fact, destiny calling at our door. What do you think is the biggest difference between wanting a life and choosing it? Comment below if this heartwarming story of love, family, and second chances moved you. Like and subscribe to the channel. Tuyet voi. Toirat vui viban mun tipto kantrin ko Alexander Vasera. The Unbreakable Bond. Legacy in the Rockies, Chapter 9. Building a life. Brick by brick. 6 months had passed since that silent promise under the stars. The simple ceremony in their garden, the legal adoption of the children by Alexander, and the subtle but significant changes in their lives had cemented their new reality. The house had changed, just like them. It remained the warm, simple home Sarah had built, but now boasted practical upgrades, a solar energy system, constant hot water, and an extension that served as a shared office. Alexander had insisted on maintaining the place's essence, understanding that the home's value transcended material cost. One morning, the sunrise painted the horizon in shades of pink and orange as Sarah woke up. Alexander's arm rested protectively around her waist. She smiled, recalling their journey. "Good morning," he murmured, hugging her from behind. "Nervous about the inauguration?" He was referring to the newly finished building they would inaugurate today, the Valley's first community library, a project born from their long, late-night conversations. "A little," Sarah admitted. "I still can't believe we did it." "Mom! Dad!" Sophie ran into the room. "Matt says I can wear my blue dress for the inauguration." Sarah smiled, hearing how naturally the children had adopted the word Dad for Alexander. It wasn't a forced transition. It just happened. Like everything important in life, the road to the library was decorated with flowers and banners made by the village children. The entire community had rallied to support the project, donating books, time, and enthusiasm. It wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of how a community could transform when someone believed in its potential. "You look beautiful," Alexander whispered to Sarah as they walked toward the makeshift podium. The ceremony was brief, but emotional. Sarah spoke about the importance of books and how she wanted all the children in the valley to have access to new worlds through reading. Alexander shared how he had rediscovered the value of community and family, learning more in these months than in years of formal education. When they cut the ribbon together, the crowd erupted in applause. The triplets were the first to run inside, losing themselves among the colorful shelves and cozy reading nooks. Alexander took Sarah's hand as they watched the children explore the place. It wasn't the biggest or most luxurious building he had ever financed, but it was undoubtedly the most meaningful. "You know what's the strangest thing?" he commented as they walked among the attendees. "I don't miss my old life. I thought I would, that I would feel trapped here. But every day I discover something new that makes me feel more alive." Sarah squeezed his hand tenderly. "Sometimes what we're looking for is far from where we think it should be." Later, as the children remained engrossed in books, Alexander and Sarah stepped aside, watching their small world from the building's steps. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" she asked. "For rescuing me that day on the road, for giving me the opportunity to know the children, for teaching me that success is not measured in bank accounts, but in moments like this." Sarah kissed him gently. "You rescued us too, in more ways than you imagine." A gentle wind blew through the trees. The sun began to set, bathing everything in a golden light that seemed to bless this new chapter. Alexander hugged Sarah, fully aware that what they had built together was more valuable than all the corporate empires in the world. They were not a perfect family, but they were real, with their daily challenges and small victories, and that, he discovered, was exactly what he had always dreamed of without knowing it. Chapter 10. The Unseen Legacy. A year later, Alexander's commitment to the valley deepened. He realized that the biggest issue facing the remote community wasn't funding, but connection. Using his tech background, he founded a small ethical firm based in the valley, High Country Solutions, dedicated to bringing high-speed internet and sustainable telehealth services to rural communities across the Rockies. He leveraged his remaining contacts, not for personal gain, but to lobby for digital equality. His former life's power was now used for genuine good. One day, Matt, who was now 18 and applying to college, received an unexpected letter. It was from a prominent university, offering him a full scholarship for engineering, a result of his impressive local community work, which included helping his father map out the fiber optic network. The letter contained a handwritten note. "We are impressed not by your test scores, but by the integrity of your character. Your father's name may have opened the door, but your heart and work ethic earned this." Meanwhile, Sarah, who had always dreamed of being an advocate, used her new stability to pursue her passion. She started a nonprofit focusing on microloans and business mentorship for single mothers in rural areas, ensuring they didn't have to choose between their children and their dreams, as she once had. The final testament to their journey came during a town hall meeting. Alexander stood up, not as the wealthy benefactor, but as a devoted resident. He announced the completion of the fiber optic network, which would bring high-speed internet to every home in the valley. an old farmer, one of the original skeptics, stood up, tears in his eyes. "Mr. Thorne, we thought you were just passing through. We thought you'd take your money and leave, like the others. But you stayed. You didn't just give us a library. You gave us a future." Alexander looked at Sarah, who was holding their hands and beaming with pride. He finally understood the full meaning of their unexpected collision. He hadn't run away from his empty life. He had crashed into his real one. The greatest legacy he would leave was not his name on a skyscraper, but the knowledge that his children, Matt, Sophie, and Luke, would grow up in a community built on the simple, essential values of love, presence, and kindness. What defines the true wealth of a community? Financial assets, or shared values? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story of finding purpose inspires you, like and subscribe for more. Chapter 11. The Echo of the Empty Empire. 3 more years passed. Life in the Colorado Rockies had settled into a rhythm of deep satisfaction. Alexander and Sarah ran their respective ventures. High Country Solutions brought digital life to the remote valleys, and Sarah's micro-loan nonprofit empowered single mothers. Their children, now young adults and teenagers, were thriving. Matt was in college, Sophie was a high school force for environmental change, and Luke was still the gentle dreamer. Alexander had successfully sold off his remaining shares in his old New York firm, severing all ties. He believed the chapter of Vivian and the Empty Empire was definitively closed. But the past, especially the one built on greed, rarely stays buried. One crisp autumn morning, Alexander received an official-looking package. It was a subpoena from a high-powered corporate law firm in New York. The lawsuit was titled Vivian Thorne versus Alexander Thorne and High Country Solutions. The claim was staggering. Vivian was suing Alexander for $50 million, alleging that his transfer of intellectual property, IP, and software development from his private New York accounts to High Country Solutions was a fraudulent transfer of marital assets hidden during their failed engagement, and that the success of his current company belonged to her. "She's finally found a way to weaponize her jealousy," Alexander said, his voice flat as he showed the papers to Sarah. "She knows I don't care about the money, but she wants to destroy the company that actually means something to me." Sarah, who had grown into an advocate with the fire of a lawyer, read the document carefully. "This is not about money, Alexander. This is about power and spite. She wants to prove that your happiness here is illegal." The lawsuit posed a real threat. A lengthy legal battle in New York would force Alexander away from the family and into the very corporate chaos he had fled. More dangerously, it threatened to seize the local community's only source of high-speed internet and telehealth, High Country Solutions, a lifeline for the valley. Interactive question. If you were Alexander and Sarah, knowing the danger this lawsuit poses to the community, would you A. Fight the lawsuit in a New York courtroom, risking years of emotional drain? Or B. Use a public media campaign within the Rockies community to pressure Vivian into dropping the suit, arguing that she is attacking a vital, non-profit-like service? Comment your strategic defense. Chapter 2. The Defense of the Unseen Assets. Alexander and Sarah agreed immediately. They would not fight on Vivian's battleground. They would fight on the ground of integrity and community. Sarah contacted her network of single mothers and local leaders. Alexander worked with his local staff and their community legal advisor. Their defense was not financial. It was moral and communal. Their strategy: turn the $50 million lawsuit into a public relations case about one woman trying to disconnect an entire valley for spite. The local rally. Sarah organized a town hall meeting. She explained the situation plainly. Vivian Thorne is trying to take Alexander's company, which means she is trying to turn off your internet, shut down your children's access to online classes, and end our telehealth services. She is suing the very oxygen of our community." The response was immediate and fierce. The old farmer who had once been skeptical of Alexander led a petition to the New York court, signed by every resident over the age of 18. The countersuit of purpose. Alexander's attorney filed a countersuit, not for money, but to legally designate High Country Solutions as a public benefit corporation, PBC, cementing its mission over profit. They argued that its true value was not the IP, but the social capital it created. When the New York corporate lawyers saw the mountain of legal documents submitted by local residents, the petition, and the media attention in the West, they panicked. This was not the simple financial squeeze they expected. It was a community uprising. The climax came when the New York judge, receiving hundreds of personal letters from Colorado residents, from students thanking the internet for their education to doctors praising the telehealth services, issued a unique ruling. The judge stated that while the legal framework suggested the potential for financial transfer, the court recognized the unique and profound public service role of High Country Solutions. The judge did not dismiss the case, but ordered a 6-month stay and demanded that Vivian, Detective Alexander, and Sarah meet in the valley to conduct a social impact audit. "Go home, Alexander," the judge concluded. "Show Ms. Thorne what you've built. Let the valley be your lawyer." Chapter 13. The Valley as the Advocate. Vivian arrived by private helicopter. The irony was not lost on anyone. She stepped out, impeccably dressed, onto the muddy soccer field where Alexander had once been picked up. She was accompanied by her chief New York lawyer, who looked utterly miserable at the elevation. The meeting was not held in a boardroom, but in the new community library, surrounded by the books Alexander had funded. Over the next 3 days, Alexander and Sarah didn't argue legal points. They simply lived their life. They introduced Vivian to the single mothers, whose businesses thrived because of Sarah's loans and the company's internet access. They took her to the rural clinic, where the local doctor performed telehealth consultations using the fiber optic network. They introduced her to Sophie, who calmly explained how high-speed internet allowed her to lead a regional climate change awareness project. Vivian's corporate lawyer was the first to break. "Ms. Thorne, this is not a $50 million lawsuit. This is a PR disaster for you. Every person we depose will testify that you are trying to cut off a children's medical lifeline." The true turning point, however, came during a private walk. Vivian looked at Alexander, not with hatred, but with a strange sadness. "You really did it, didn't you, Alexander?" she said quietly. "You escaped. You built something real. I just wanted to remind you that you left behind something that was mine, but you replaced it with something I can never have." Alexander looked at the surrounding mountains. "I didn't leave you, Vivian. I left the person I was. That man belonged to that life. This one belongs here." He showed her the tiny, faded scar on his head from the fall that brought him to Sarah's doorstep. "That scar is the only thing I have left of my old life, and it led me to everything." On the last day, in the library, Vivian's lawyer addressed the court via video link. "Your Honor, the plaintiff, Ms. Vivian Thorne, is withdrawing her lawsuit with prejudice. We have determined that the true value of High Country Solutions is inextricably linked to its social capital, rendering the original financial claims moot. Ms. Thorne wishes the community well." The room erupted in quiet applause, the quiet, dignified applause of a community that had just defended its own. Epilogue. The Perpetual Foundation. Alexander and Sarah had won the biggest battle of their lives, not by spending money, but by demonstrating where their true assets lay, in the love of their children, the respect of their neighbors, and the unshakable foundation of their moral choices. Alexander looked at Sarah, the woman who had rescued a lost billionaire and taught him the meaning of value. He was no longer running from his past. He was rooted in his present. The greatest legacy is not what we build, but the change we inspire. Final call to action. What is the most powerful lawyer? A corporate shark, or a community united by a cause? Comment below. If this story of finding true meaning in life inspires you, like this video and subscribe.